going to tell you a little bit about the museum. Walter Beech was from Pulaski, Tennessee, which is about an hour from here, and he left as a young man and went to Wichita, Kansas and stayed there, which is why Beechcraft is located in Wichita. We're actually here at the suggestion of a lady named Louise Thaden. She flew in the first air race for women in 1929, raced against Amelia Earhart and beat her. A couple years later, when women were allowed to enter the men's races, they both entered. Louise beat Amelia the second time, and she beat the men in that race as well. She was from Bentonville, Arkansas, and she left and went to Wichita, fell in love with aviation and got a job at the Travel Air Company and flew their aircraft in those earlier races. Eventually, she switched over to Beechcraft, and when Walter decided to put a stagger wing in a cross-country race called the Bendix race, Mrs. Beech told him to put a woman in the cockpit. He did. It was Louise, and she beat everyone in that race, including the military pilots, by a good 20 minutes, and she fell in love with the stagger wing. Now, that red airplane back there is a stagger wing. The top wing has a negative offset, which is where the name stagger wing comes from. If you were to look down on the top of it, Les has got the model. You can see that the wings are staggered. These aircraft are made out of a wood framework, and they're covered in fabric, and then they treat that fabric with several layers of chemical. When that dries and hardens, it forms a pretty sturdy outside surface, but if you were to step in the wrong place on the wing, try to climb on that aircraft, run into the side of it, or even squeeze on parts of it, all of that would damage the cover or the finish, and it would have to be reskinned. That starts at around $100,000 and goes up from there. Pretty labor intensive. All the stitching and everything is done by hand. There's no machine work, and there's not a lot of folks that still do that process. Louise Thaden was in Tullahoma in 1973 as a guest speaker for the Stagger Wing Association's annual convention that was being held. She suggested somebody needed to preserve the heritage of the aircraft, and a bunch of those guys thought that was a pretty good idea. They got together that afternoon and decided they were going to start a museum. Louise told them she would give her memorabilia. The Parrish family donated the property we sit on, and in January of 1974, we opened our doors as the Stagger Wing Museum with 3 loaned airplanes in the backyard, Louise's memorabilia, and that little log cabin you saw as you walked up here. Over the years, we've grown. Eventually, the name did change to Beechcraft Heritage Museum because we do have more than the Stagger Wing, and we are preserving the heritage of the aircraft line. We now have 78,000 square feet of space and 39 aircraft in the museum. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're owned by our membership. We have about 870, give or take, members worldwide. Little bit of history on that log cabin. It was here. Mr. Parrish had purchased it for a meeting place for the Stagger Wing Club, and so when they decided to have the museum, it was logical to use that for the first office. Eventually, they built the Walter Beech hangar back there, and then there's another log structure that was built from timber that was cleared from down here in the creek, and they hired somebody that knew how to build a log cabin. So originally, for many years, it was just the hangar back here and the 2 log structures. I'm going to let Les he's going to tell you where things are and be your tour guide. There are some maps up there if you want one. You don't need them. There's 3 hangars, and Les knows where he's going. So
the best way to start, I see, is start with the oldest plane, concept first and everything. We'll go back in that corner there and look at those, and from there, then we'll progress to the other. So.
I do need to tell you the rules. Les knows the rules, but I'm going to tell y'all. Please don't get into or onto any of the aircraft. Doors are open for you to look into. Not get into them. Please don't open aircraft doors that are not already open. If you touch them, I'm going to be real cranky because you're going to have to stay and help clean them, and I don't want to do that today, so please don't. And Les will be even crankier because it kind of falls on his shoulders too. You are free to take all the photos you like. We love if you share. Your friends become our friends, and we get a little free publicity. There is one exhibit that you can get into, and Les will be sure and point that out. But you go down the hallway, past that red Stagger Wing picture, into the hangar back here, and it's to the left. It's a white cockpit with green stripes and green stairs. It is a C-45 Beech 18, and it is authentic, and Les has done a lot of work to make it pretty. So be sure and look at that. Just be careful getting in and out. All right, now you're free.
This is Beechcraft serial number 1. It was designed and built by Walter Beech and Clyde Cessna and Lloyd Stearman, who were all associated with the Beechcraft in the early years. And later years, they went out and separated, and you know, Cessna and Beechcraft and everybody in Stearman. This is a real unique airplane. It led a rough life early on in the 30s. It crashed in New York in icy conditions and was just completely destroyed. But several years ago, they gathered up, dug up a lot of the parts out of the ground, and they gathered up everything, and so it's restored back to its original condition. Now, they made this airplane here to sell, but it didn't sell good, and a couple of years before the second one ever came out. But there's a lot of changes that happened to this airplane. One thing that is really unique about it is the landing gear is very narrow on it, which would have made it very mean in takeoff and landing. And if you stand back and look at this one and the next one in line, you can see that they widened the gear way on out to make it a little bit more livable, you might say.
Really?
Yeah. There's a lot of pictures over on the wall of this one as it was destroyed and then in the process. And of course, a lot of memorabilia from the Beech factories and everything, around the walls and everything. The one on the left is serial number 1, Travel Air, which was before Beechcraft. And it's got this early model. People always talk about V8s. Well, this is an OX5 V8 engine here, and that was the airplane of choice back during the days when this was built. So it later years became superseded by the radial engine, which was quite a bit more reliable and more horsepower for size and everything. But that's a good example of the early vintage V8.
Were any of those used in World War I?
Probably could have been. It would have been early on or late on, because that engine there came out after World War I. I don't know the exact date, but the OX5 engine was the one of choice most people used.
Water cooled.
And this is a Travel Air.
That's cool.
Travel Air that later, the 4000 that airplane evolved into this, which has the radial Wright engine in it. They used Wrights and Jacobs engines up until the years later when the Pratt Whitneys came out. The radial engine was much more reliable engine. Parrish family owns this.
Did you start them by doing the propeller?
Huh?
Did
Yes.
you start them by?
Yeah,
Doing the
most of these are hand propped, except for the later stagger wings, which they had battery crank power in them. This is a mystery ship here, which Travel Air made to race and competition. This airplane here had suffered many rough things in its life. It was restored several times. It's been crashed. It's killed a couple of pilots, but it'll never fly again. It's back here for display only. But it was a ship that Travel Air built to try to beat the competition back in the days and everything. I worked on this back when we were restoring it back in the 70s.
Class, are these planes flyable?
Are
Are these planes flyable?
Yes,
They are.
they are. They are, but as I say, this was such a dangerous airplane. Even in its day, the hot shot pilots didn't much want to. It was very dangerous to fly. Speed and handling and several things involved. Early on development made it, and it was very, very fast. For its day, you know, it's like a little over 200 miles an hour, which is really fast for back then. And these are just examples. This is Chinchette, a guy up in Maine donated this airplane here. This is one of the later model stagger wings, and they evolved over the years. This has got the Pratt Whitney, the Jacobs engine in it. The early models and the later models had the Pratt Whitneys in them, but
Is that the one they called the Shaky Jake? The Shaky Jake?
yeah. They were good motors, but they had some, what you really wouldn't think, they call them reliability problems, but they compared to other motors, they were really reliable, but compared to a Pratt Whitney, they had reliable engine problems, you know. One thing, back over here at the corner, I'd like to show you a real interesting feature. This one didn't have flaps, it had only ailerons. So they brought this out there like that. It wasn't it was a good idea at the time, but it didn't last long. They later put, if you'll notice on these other stagger wings, they got flaps and ailerons, both of them. You know. Published pictures of people who were involved with all of that and everything. And I became, over here in 1974, I had an antique classic airplane, and that was before the museum was here. And so I kept, after I got it restored, I kept it over here in a hangar. That hangar's no longer here. It's up where the other hangar's at right now, but I kept it up there. And during that period of time, this place evolved into stagger wing, and associated Beechcraft aircraft. I remember the board meetings and all of that. There were a lot of us that had antiques and classics over here that we just flew out regularly and sport flying and had a good time. John Parrish and his family had a stagger wing and had this travel air, and so that's how come Louis Staten came down here, and they brought several stagger wings in, and at that time that's when they suggested having this facility here. So, but she was quite instrumental in having it made and everything. And Olive Ann Beach, the wife of Walter Beach, and Louis Staten have been here several times. And I was fortunate enough to meet them back in the late 70s when I had my plane over here. And there's her pilot's license with the Orville Wright signature, and there's several other pilots that had their signature by Orville Wright. Mine didn't get signed by Orville Wright. I missed that a few years.
You know what kind of wood they used on these props?
Birch and all kinds of maple. I've heard several different kinds. I think it depends on what part of the country you're in more than anything, what you could get.
You figure they'd use something hard.
Huh?
You figure they'd use something hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want it to split.
Right.
Like a big bug off or something.
Right. That's what I was thinking, you know, they're like made out of Osage yarn or bowline.
They're most all of them are laminated, so they're not carved out of one piece. Most of them are laminated.
What that one of them models?
That was in Antarctic.
I think the Staggerling was the prettiest airplane they ever built.
It was really pretty.
That was the Learjet of the day.
Look at them all flying together. It's got junk stored up there. It's like, yeah, boxes of stuff. Could have been cold to fly on those planes, wouldn't it?
Yep. That says U.S. Antarctic Service.
Look at this quilt.
Wow.
That's really nice.
That's neat.
I mean, have you actually been involved in restoring?
I was involved in restoring the Travel Air Mystery Ship. It was here when I was here, and the fellow that was that we worked with, I worked on it some, and present day I work on pretty much any one of them that needs anything. And I've got several projects which you'll see later on down in the big hangar.
To go see James, and one day bring you down there and talk James into taking you up in his Cheetah. He's got his own private hangar down there at Southern. And I'm sure he'd take you up and let you fly. Or take you up to fly. You gotta do it before he gets to where he can. And you can go and he tried to get me to go last time I was in there. I said, man, I'm fat fit.
Yeah, we've been over here. When Les flew that, we could be sitting in the back.
That's what he said, you know, on Monday of that week on the radio. He said, "Are you coming down, dude?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, you ought to." And then they flew that plane. I was sick.
With the antenna on top, it looks like one of them CV antennas they sold back in the 70s.
Yeah.
Remember them? Put on your trunk lip.
Now this one went through 1 million. A lot of people wonder how that radio engine works right there too. It tells you how it works.
They're all hooked to one.
Yeah, it's got a master rod in there
Yeah.
that goes around the crank journal,
Yeah.
and all those other rods just connect to it. It's really great ingenious for the time. And
Yeah.
Really reliable.
Yeah. It's got one primary rod and it's got 8 secondary rods.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did it have needle bearings or roller bearings?
Yeah, and most of us just the regular bearings
Oh,
on most
but,
of them.
okay.
Bushing bearings or whatever they call them.
Babbitts.
Yeah, they're Babbitt. They're like bronze bushings. Just like the wrist pins.
Okay, gotcha, yeah.
You can feel it. You hear it squeak. It's dry. You hear it?
Yeah, dry as a bone. Ain't it?
Yep. That's cool. Damn, well, I wish I knew. You got a tape measure on you?
No.
Cool.
They're running whiskey and bananas.
Yeah, that's cool.
This runs through the centrifugal. This is currently going to be used. We've got additional landing gear and other elements that we're going to put on this, and like put all the landing gear on one side and activate it so it will actually raise up and down. It's a project that
In other words, did it straight.
Yeah, we're gonna be working on this.
That'd be cool. What's the bore on these?
Huh?
Like, what's the bore on these?
Oh, it's probably around 6 inches, I don't remember. They're quite big.
Les,
That's an old Jacobs.
that's the 18 that you flew back in October, ain't it?
Yes, yeah, the polished one is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different variations. If you look, you can stand right here and see, this was the cargo one. This right here was a later model version, passenger type, they call it Miss Main. If you look at the windows, the rectangular windows on it are quite a bit taller than the ones on the early model 18 up there. The roof is a little bit taller. It's hard to notice that, but if you'll look, you'll see the difference in the windows.
Yeah.
But this is a later model. That's the earliest model. And the other two, the freight and the polished one, are the real early after this. And then this is later model. This one flew in, this main flew in October, and had a little lift engine problem, so the guy just left it, he donated here of the engine, and now it's assembled and everything.
Trying to know.
And you can see that I just got the steel sleeve, an aluminum sleeve. But there's one better one over yonder that shows everything.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I took
Yeah, that's right.
the wing off of it, with them stands and everything, so people can get
This
up there
thing?
and actually look at it
I used to ride with mine. He let me steer.
before you couldn't get up on it.
When did you put them stands on?
Huh?
When did you put them stands on?
About 3 or 4 months ago.
That's what I was thinking. That wasn't like it when we
Oh,
done it before.
no, and now you can get up close to it. You can't get in it, but you can see a whole lot of everything. And this is what you said, the stagger wing here. This is the good demonstration here of what they went through to build the stagger wing and the wood construction involved in it. It was donated. At first they were going to restore it, but the people at Beechcraft decided that it would be better off in this condition here to show people the workmanship involved in the construction.
Yeah. Take a man a lot of hours to take somebody a lot of hours to home build one of these.
Unbelievable. This is your good engine display. You can make good money right here. Somebody was talking about the steel. And you can see that very prominent right here. Steel liners and aluminum air-cooled fins, the way it's all put together. It's a Continental engine, very similar to the one behind you. There you go, Irvin.
You see what you would look at a car, what you depend upon on a car.
Oh, yeah.
Where's that C-clip Continental's got the AD out on the crankshaft counterbalancers?
Oh, I don't know.
Hmm?
I don't know what model that was.
It's the later ones that
Uh-oh.
last 3 years they've
Oh,
grounded.
I'm not familiar with them.
Did you work on this display?
Some,
Cause it wasn't here, was it?
yeah. I've worked on some of these engines over here, put them on display, the Wright and the Pratt, and some of this stuff here. That's a Jacobs there. That's similar to the one like in the old red Twin Beach up in the other building and everything. This is a Kenner. Kenner was used even earlier. It's used in the old travel airs and things way on back yonder. Kenner was a pretty prominent name back in the day. And they just got superseded by Wright, and then Pratt Whitney took the radial engine over.
Did you get anything from Cactus, emails and stuff?
Not anymore, not lately.
Well, now, about 2 years ago, I'd say, maybe then, he sent out a little video one time, and it showed these people flying a biplane, and they got out on the wing, changed the tire.
Oh,
I still got that. I still got it somewhere. It was just what they did in those days when they had to, right? I'll send it to Mike. I'm gonna send it to Mike.
yeah, this is a good explanation of
Yeah.
how radio works. One
They
of
rock
the cam,
Yes.
Yeah.
And just that middle number, like a 480 or 560, that's a cubic inch.
Okay.
Yeah, that's push rod right here.
I'd like to know the torque
In
of them.
that case.
Well,
That's part,
Like 450 horse.
probably around 400 foot-pound of torque.
I bet it's more than that. You know,
Yeah, I
that
just don't.
with pistons that big. You know, I would just assume.
Cruise RPM's about 2,300
Right.
RPM.
RPM horsepower. See, this one's rated at 185 horsepower.
2,300
2300 RPM.
takeoff.
Yeah. See, none of them. I ain't seen any got any torque specs yet. What's that? 374, 45. That would be more my number of torque. How much it's got?
That's a serial number.
I know, but
It could be.
you know what I mean.
We're gonna move that JT6 turbine engine down here and put it in the display down here. We just hadn't got good weather and things to do it, but it belongs down here because it came out of the planes that we have. Beech 18 twin beach in several variations of which you've already seen up in the other building. This is the military version, which was used to train bombardiers and gunners during World War II. 90% of all the bombardiers in World War II trained in an AT-11. And one of the reasons why is because they were equipped with a top secret Norden bomb sight and twin 30 Browning machine guns. And I just built those machine guns last week and put them up there. If you would look in here at this other.
Big Brown 50 cows. What was the deal on this one? This is the one less than working 90% of the time. He said it's over with it.
Drastically, it's set after its military use, and then after its civilian use after the military, it's set in a salvage yard in Arizona for almost 50 years. And it was bought by the museum, some generous person who's got a lot of money. And so we're moving over. It's in the process of being restored right now. And it's one of my projects that I do. So you can see sort of how things, and most of you have been to a junkyard, you know how things are in a junkyard. They get cut and withered and everything like that. Well, I worked on all the other side of it, and I've done all this right here is stuff that I've been working on and put out here for display. As you walk around it, you can see this is the top secret Norden bomb sight. And if you'll look right close, this thing was mounted, and this was a two-piece deal. The bottom piece mounted in the airplane right here, and the top piece was carried in a sealed bag and was guarded by guns. There's some pictures over here showing the trainer getting ready to load in and showing them carrying a bag, putting it up in here. they never did have the two together unless they were in the airplane for security reasons. The bottom part that's hooked in the airplane was hooked to the autopilot devices and all the engine control devices, navigation devices of the airplane. And the top part was what the navigator bombardier trainer used to calculate airspeed, air density, wind direction, and all other things, so that when he triggered the bomb doors open, which we haven't got on here yet, but we've got bomb doors, but that's part of the deal. We got to put them on there. But he would trigger the bomb doors and drop the bombs out. Now this thing had two racks, one on either side, with bombs like you see sitting back there, but they were dummy bombs full of sand, but they did have an explosive in there so they could see where it hit. And so that this was like top secret in World War II, and you can see sort of the spec here of the soldiers getting in AT-11 and loading that Nordson bomb sight in here.
Bombers may go through that?
Yeah.
The engine's already been rebuilt.
Yes, brand new. I've been working on that, and this right here is something that I've been, if you look at this compared to the other side, that's what I've done about the last 3 months. This whole engine, the sails, and exhaust and everything is what I've been working on. Still a lot of things to be done. There's a whole lot going on in there.
Yes, sir. It's busy.
It's busy in there. This is something I just completed this past week. I built the two 30 cals and put them up there. It was used also, this gun turret was used to train gunners. The pilot, the gunner sits on this seat right here with his hands in this device right here. And when he put it in here, this activated this whole device. This right here made the gun turret do that, and this right here made it do that. And then these switches here fired the two 30 cals. And they used 30 cals early for training because they were smaller and less costly to use. Later on, they finally decided that the 50 cal was a lot more effective, and so in actual warfare they used 50 cal. 30 cals weren't used in training, but this was basically used for training device.
Sky condition clear below.
Here's the radio display that some of you knew I was working on.
Dew point -1 Celsius. Altimeter 9 inches of mercury.
And this thing picks up all
automated weather observation 1736 Zulu.
BC 639.
Yeah. When I was about 16, Daddy was always bringing home radio equipment. And he brought this home. This is AM. And so he brought this in. This would tune up to including the 2 meter portion of the ham radio bands. And so he brought this home, and I had this thing since I was about 16.
Memphis Center, Navajo
And it is still,
4157 Echo.
as you hear, operational, really good and everything. I had not had to do much to it since I've owned it, but anyway, I donated to the museum. This right here is an actual transmitter and receiver
pick up an IFR clearance.
as used in AT-11s and other War II military aircraft.
Just about
The transmitter,
10
of
miles
course,
south
is
of
just a
Shelbyville,
head, and receiver's a
or 4
head.
miles
They had big
southeast of
cables that
Shelbyville,
ran back to the power
en
supplies,
route to Echo Hotel
and the
Romeo.
modulators and everything else that went with them was stored back behind the cockpit. But this radio display I put on here because
They gave me, and then I think they're too busy.
it's vintage to this airplane here. And sometimes when I'm working over here, it's real quiet in here, so I'll turn it on. And you can listen to, I get Memphis chatter, Nashville. You get all kinds of chatter in here all the time.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Bendix Radio Company. You're talking about the fabric covering. This is where it starts out. You put it on here. You got big long needles, and you sew through with the threads. You sew it down to the ribs. And then you start putting dopes on it at different stages, butyrate dopes and nitrate dopes, and then a silver, which is ultraviolet protection, and then your final painted surface. And when that cures, it's tough.
I bet.